In this video, I will examine the war expanding to the West Bank, the meaning of collective punishment and if we're witnessing war crimes, and before and after footage of Gaza showing extensive destruction you will not believe. Let's go!
No one can do it better.
14 Palestinians have been killed in one of the biggest raids in the West Bank this year, and the biggest since October 7th. Israel's military says it was targeting armed Palestinian fighters in Jenin. The military used bulldozers to rip up main roads as a form of collective punishment. Bernard Smith reports from Jenin.
In the narrow streets of Jenin's crowded refugee camp, Israeli soldiers and Palestinian gunmen fight street to street and house to house. Explosives are used to punch walls into homes so soldiers can cut through them into alleyways and take on the Palestinian fighters. Tens of thousands of people live amidst the fighting. Then the military calls in its machinery for collective punishment. The bulldozers rip up the tarmac on the main streets, damaging water mains and electricity cables below. It's a new type of collective punishment that Israel has recently been inflicting on Palestinians in the West Bank.
Roads, houses and infrastructure. Any picture of a martyr annoys them. They would instantly knock off a wall that has a picture of a martyr, or a shop door, or a roundabout. They take it out on anything. The aim is to create damage.
Raids have long been a fact of life for Palestinians living under occupation. Before October the 7th, they averaged 12 a day across the West Bank, but now they average 40 a day. This raid on Jenin was the biggest there's been since the Hamas attack on Israel. And the Israeli military says it found an underground tunnel with primed explosives.
Israel will always say that it's targeting what it calls Palestinian terrorists, but here they'll tell you that the violence and ferocity of these raids is something new. Maybe it's an opportunity to deal with unfinished business and weaken Palestinian fighting groups as much as possible, while everyone else is focused on what's happening in Gaza. Bernard Smith, Al Jazeera, Jenin, in the occupied West Bank.
All right, let's bring in our senior political analyst, Marwan Bashara. And Marwan, obviously the focus has been on Gaza because more than 10,800 people have been killed there. But it is important to not take our eyes off what's happening in the occupied West Bank, what's been happening there all year and has only intensified since October 7th.
Absolutely. Look, we could now say that Israel's war on Gaza is Israel's war on Palestine. What has been in the past month a focus zero in on Gaza, pounding Gaza, killing people in Gaza, destroying its infrastructure, is slowly but surely moving to the West Bank. Of course, the West Bank is a much bigger territory and much more dispersed. And the Israelis are starting to give an example of Jenin, or to make an example of Jenin, which probably they will try and render it like Gaza. They're going to be pounding it, they're going to be occupying it, they're going to be killing a lot of people in Jenin. For a long time now, like 20 years ago, in 2022, they committed a massacre there. And for them, even 20 years prior, Jenin was also a symbol of resistance. So I think they're going to continue throughout the West Bank. We have the army that is proliferating throughout the villages and towns, including Ramallah, the so-called de facto capital of the Palestinian Authority. And in parallel to that, the settlers, the illegal settlers, the violent illegal settlers are taking advantage, with the support of the military, attacking residents, farmers, women, men, children, attacking cars, properties, and so on and so forth.
And so much so that we've had not just the United Nations, but the United States express concern, alarm about settler attacks against Palestinians, and yet nothing is happening to stop that.
Absolutely. Actually, if I remember correctly, I heard the Secretary of State saying violent extremism in the West Bank, not even naming who are the violent extremists in the West Bank. It is really unfortunate that the United States is not using any leverage. And as you and I were speaking earlier, if there's a will, there's a way. But clearly there is no will on the part of the Biden administration to do something. They boxed themselves behind the Netanyahu government, repeating the falsehoods and the sound bites of the Netanyahu government, and basically being part and parcel to the ongoing massacres and genocide, both in Gaza and in the West Bank. So something got to give here, because if they don't, I think the West Bank is bound to implode.
This has always been a war on the Palestinian people, but Israel like to say this is their war on Hamas and whatnot. But now this war, so-called war, has expanded into the West Bank. And remember, the West Bank is not governed by Hamas like Gaza is. So at the beginning, it was a war on the Palestinian people. It continues to be, but this just shows the hypocrisy as they ruthlessly attack the West Bank. So in the interview, they talk about collective punishment. They talk about how it's illegal, how they bulldoze the streets, how they break the water pipes and the electricity wires and the infrastructure, and then how they destroy the homes in all these urban areas where people live to make it unlivable, which is collective punishment. It looks like to me that diseases and things are coming because the infrastructure has been so destroyed and it's unsanitary. This has been going on for a long time. So they've been targeting the Jenin refugee camp inside of the West Bank. It's a refugee camp. So it's very dense, it's very densely populated, and there's no way but for civilians to be killed. They've been doing that in Gaza as well. There was a huge massacre in 2002 in Jenin, and the illegal settlers are really doing their dirt. The illegal settlers are also supported by the Israeli military. So they've been shooting the Palestinians, doing all kinds of atrocities. They've been destroying their property. And they were also given guns by the Israeli government. And the Biden administration, the United States, are more than just complicit. They're supplying the money and the bombs, which are killing people. You know? And there's 40 raids a day that are happening and going on inside of the West Bank. Let's take a look at collective punishment here so we can define this and get this out in the open. Collective punishment, as you see here, collective punishment is a punishment or sanction imposed on a group for acts allegedly perpetrated by a member of that group, which could be an ethnic or political group or just the family, friends, and neighbors of the perpetrator. So that's what they have. They're just punishing everybody. They're just punishing all of the Palestinian people for the defense of these fighters of Hamas and their attack on Israel, which they executed. Continuing, because individuals who are not responsible for the acts are targeted, collective punishment is not compatible with the basic principle of individual responsibility. Exactly. So you're just targeting people that had nothing to do with it. That's basically what it is. Collective punishment is basically where you just punish people that are a part of the group that had nothing to do with it. And that's exactly what we have going on. The punished group may often have no direct association with the perpetrator other than living in the same area and cannot be assumed to exercise control over the perpetrator's actions. They can't stop the Hamas fighters for resisting the occupation. Remember, they don't have a bunch of guns. The Palestinian civilians don't have a bunch of guns. Collective punishment is a war crime prohibited by a treaty in both international and non-international armed conflicts. Okay, more specifically, Common Articles 33 of the 4th Geneva Convention and Article 6 of the Additional Protocol 2. That's why you hear people speaking about the Geneva Convention often. Now I want to show you guys some footage here of Gaza before and after, as well as just the overall destruction of Gaza, which shows in itself prima facie collective punishment. By destroying the areas where all of these people live is collective punishment. By destroying the roads, the infrastructure, the electricity, not allowing them to have food and water, all of that is collective punishment on a people. More information here. Israel's collective punishment in Gaza is a war crime. We have fallen off a precipice. This cannot continue, says UN rights chief. Israel's month-long war on Gaza has killed more than 10,500 Palestinians, wounded thousands more, displaced 70% of the Strip's 2.3 million residents. United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, declared that collective punishment by Israel of Palestinian civilians amounts to a war crime, as does the unlawful forcible evacuation of civilians. Turk's comments came after he visited the Rafah border crossings that connects Egypt to Gaza, which he described as the gates to a living nightmare, a nightmare where people have been suffocating under persistent bombardment, mourning their families, struggling for water, for food, for electricity, and fuel. Because remember, all of that Israel controls, and they're not allowing any of that stuff to come in. Long before the Hamas attacks, Gaza was described as the world's biggest open-air prison because it's fully gated. It's fully gated and blocked off from everything else, and there's a blockade, as it says here, under a 56-year occupation and a 16-year blockade by Israel. Even in the context of a 56-year-old occupation, the current situation is the most dangerous in decades, faced by the people in Gaza, in Israel, in the West Bank, but also regionally. We have in a few days in Gaza thousands and thousands of children killed. According to the Palestinian Ministry of Health in Gaza, the Israeli war against Hamas has killed over 4,300 children. And I don't accept that it's a war against Hamas. It's a war on all of the Palestinian people. Amnesty International has compiled damning evidence of war crimes as Israel attacks wipe out entire families. Yeah, so families have been completely just wiped out. They're completely gone. Full lineages are gone. Some global experts and critics have demanded action from the International Criminal Court on escalating Israel war crimes and genocide of the Palestinian people. We must put an end to the long-standing siege on Gaza, stand up against the ethnic cleansing of Gaza and the Palestinians, Jerusalem, and the West Bank and elsewhere, document the genocidal assaults that are happening on the Palestinian people, and help to bring massive humanitarian aid and reconstruction to the Palestinians, take care of our traumatized colleagues and their families. Because, of course, these people are completely traumatized, and nobody's talking about the mental health of these people and their children. I mean, their mental health is just completely destroyed. Let me move to a verse here, James 2:13. For he shall have judgment without mercy that has showed no mercy. That's the Father. This is talking about Yah. The Father, for he, the Father, shall have judgment without mercy that has showed no mercy. And mercy rejoiceth against judgment. Remember, the Father is a God of love, but he's also a God of war. So he will make war. He will exact righteous judgment on the perpetrators of these evils and this collective punishment. Don't even worry about it. It's all been written down, and the Father will take care of it. All praises to the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. This is Crown Prince Media. I am the Crown Prince. Let's go.
No one can do it better.